Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more waterfowl patterning, and today we've got another combo that we haven't tried yet, and it's one that I'm definitely excited to test out and see what kind of results we get, because I have a feeling it's gonna look pretty good based on what we've seen with both the shells and this setup previously, just in a different shot size. So I expect to see some good results out of this combo as well. But for the shells I brought out here today, I got out some more of these, the Salt Creek Vintage Waterfowl shells. These ones are their 12 gauge 2.5 inch ounce and an eighth of the number 4 bismuth is what we're going to be shooting today, and they're moving about 1300 feet per second, and they are the vintage low psi. You can see 6100 psi there. So these are for your old school antique style shotguns and stuff if you wanted to go waterfowl hunting or something with those. But we have seen some really nice results out of these shells so far. So what can the bismuth 4s do through today's combination? And as for that combo that we're going to be running them through today, I brought out this guy. This is a 1974 Stevens Model 311H. It's a double barrel, 12 gauge, 28 inch barrels with a fixed mod full choke configuration. The left barrel is a full choke, the right barrel is a mod choke, and to the best of my measurements, the full choke barrel comes out right at a 697 constriction, and the mod barrel comes out right at a 705. So maybe just a touch more open than some of these old fixed full choke and mod choke shotguns and stuff typically are, but still this is classified as a mod full configuration. And we tested this combo with some of those vintage Salt Creek Bismuth 5s a while back and saw some really nice results. So I was curious what the 4s can actually do. So we know we have a good shell and we know we have a good setup, so I'm thinking we should see a pretty nice pattern overall. And as for today's test, everything is set up the same as usual. I've got 2 duck targets set up at 40 yards, so that way we can take one shot with the full choke barrel and one shot with the modified choke barrel, and we can see how both perform. And I've got the chronograph out here as well so we can get our velocity from the shells. So enough talking, let's get you guys a view of these targets. We'll take a shot through each barrel and then we'll go check out our results. We should see a pretty nice looking pattern, but let's go over here and take these shots and see what we actually get. Alright, so let's take a look at our velocities real quick before we go look at our targets. Now, the box claim is 1300, and we did not see that, but I'll talk more about that in just a second. So the first shot through the full choke barrel gave us 1214 feet per second, and the second shot through the mod choke barrel gave us 1127. Now, like I mentioned just a second ago, we did not see the 1300 feet per second box claim, which we had previously been right at that 1300 mark with these shells. However, in the time or two that I've tested this particular 311 on camera or messed with it off camera, I don't know that I've ever actually gotten up to box velocity, which is pretty surprising considering we have 28 inch barrels. But ultimately, a little bit lower than box claim velocity is what I commonly see out of that shotgun for whatever reason. So I'd say our velocities are looking decent considering what the setup is, and I honestly don't know why it always gives us a little bit lower of a velocity. But either way, we're definitely not anything too wild or crazy up here for velocity numbers. But what kind of a pattern was it actually able to give us down at 40 yards? Let's go check it out and see what we got. Alright, so now we're down here at our 40-yard targets, and let's take a look and see what we actually got. We'll start over here on the left, which was our first shot through the full choke barrel, and this is the result that we got. Now, I do believe we were just a little bit low on the paper here. That was most likely just me not being super experienced with that particular shotgun, and it is a double barrel, so sometimes you can get a little bit off on one barrel compared to the other. Either way, what we see here is not a bad pattern. It's definitely on the broad and open side, but through the main majority area of our pattern, it is pretty even and consistent there. There's not really any voids big enough for a duck to get through, all the way until we get to the far outskirt edges here. And as you can see, we still had a couple of them right through the middle of that duck, so we probably still would have gotten him even being a little bit low like that. So ultimately, with the full choke, I'd say it's a pretty decent mid-range type of pattern. I don't think it's going to quite reach out there and touch them at 50, 55, 60 yards yards, whatever, but I don't really think that's what these shells are designed to do in the first place. And when you're hunting with an old school setup kind of like this, you're probably going to be at, decoy to mid-range type of shots. So not off to a terrible start here with the full choke, I wouldn't say. That is a plenty usable enough waterfowl pattern that's gonna work out to that 40-yard range. But let's move to the modified choke and take a look at that. All right, now we're over here at the modified choke target, and you can immediately see that there is a massive difference here. Much more broad and spread open than what we saw through that full choke. Surprisingly enough, because the constrictions are really not all that much different. 697 to 705, yeah, there's a noticeable difference there, but nothing crazy, I wouldn't call it. But it definitely made a difference here. Now, we did still have one right through the neck area on that duck, so you probably still would have gotten him to slowly fall down out of the sky, but I would say through this mod choke barrel, that is a close range decoy type of pattern where you might be able to reach out to 35 to 40 yards, but there's a big difference here immediately, that's for sure. Now, even though it is a pretty broad and open pattern, it is pretty evenly spread as well. Really, the only kind of sort of void in the pattern is just over here at the bottom right corner of that blue duck target. But as for the rest of the pattern, it is pretty evenly spread across the board. So yeah, I would definitely say that these shells like a touch more choke constriction, which is why I really think they did well through that Marlin Model 90. It had just a little bit more constriction over this 311. Now, this is still plenty usable, but it's definitely a much closer range pattern than what we had seen through the full choke pattern a second ago. So overall here, looking at these two patterns kind of side by side, there's definitely a massive difference between the two choke constrictions. There's no question about that. Both are usable, but this 311 definitely did a little bit better with the 5-shot than the 4-shot, I would say. And maybe that is because they have more pellets and they filled in the pattern just a little bit more. Either way, this is still a plenty usable combination. It's just a case of you're probably going to want to keep it at 30 to 35 yards and in, really. If you're hunting at 25 to 30 yards over some decoys or something, then yeah, that's absolutely going to be a plenty good enough pattern for you. Okay, and here's the two wads out of that shell. The one over here on the left is going to be your full choke, and the one on the right is going to be your modified choke. But as you can see, there is literally like no difference to them whatsoever. There's no damage, nothing stuck down in there. Everything looks perfect, and I'd say they did what they were supposed to do for these shells. That 311 just doesn't quite have the constriction like we saw in that Marlin Model 90. So that's why we saw the little bit more broad and open patterns than what we had previously seen. Either way though, the wads look perfectly fine. Definitely nothing too special to see, and not really anything to take note of. Alright y'all, well, what did you think about those patterns right there? Definitely pretty solid patterns overall, but they're not patterns that are going to reach out there to 45, 50, 55 yards. And that just comes down to the setup, ultimately. I think these shells just prefer that slight touch more constriction, but still, this is a very usable pattern for those of you that are going to be decoy hunting or kind of mid-range hunting at the 25 to 35 yard range with maybe a 40-yard shot thrown in there. That's going to be about perfect for this combo. So I guess leave your thoughts down in the comments. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of these Salt Creek Vintage Waterfowl shells? And if so, what kind of results have you seen? Do you have one of these old 311s? And if so, what kind of patterns do you get out of it? And what kind of stuff do you like to use it for? And are these patterns that you would actually hunt with? Or would you prefer to see them a little bit more condensed or something like that? Let me know all that down below, as well as maybe what other combos or setups might you want to see these shells through. Let me know what you guys think down below. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description down below if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.